Ugh, look at her. You can put a uniform on a stray, but it still reeks of the alley. Fire her. Now. A packed restaurant. A snobby socialite. A humiliated waitress. The socialite just made the biggest mistake of her life. She thinks she's ordering a minimum wage worker around. She has no idea she's speaking to Elena Vance, the billionaire investor who is deciding, in this very second, whether to save the restaurant or let it burn to the ground with her in it. The polyester blend apron was the worst part. It itched. Elena Vance, known in boardrooms from Silicon Valley to Singapore as E. Vance, the venture capitalist with a Midas touch and zero patience, was currently Lena, a trainee waitress on a trial shift at the Seraphine. And Lena was hot, flustered, and deeply regretting her choice of custom-made, silk-lined sneakers, which were already accumulating a sticky residue from the kitchen mat. This was her process. When E. Vance Enterprises was poised to make a 9-figure acquisition, Elena didn't just read the profit and loss statements. She went into the trenches. She became a temp, a line cook, a delivery driver. She believed you couldn't understand a business's soul by looking at its spreadsheets. You had to feel its pulse. And the pulse of the Seraphine was thready. The restaurant was a beautiful corpse. Located in a prime Manhattan heritage building, it boasted soaring ceilings, marble columns, and a wine list that was hemorrhaging money. The owner, Charles Hemmings, was a man who loved the idea of fine dining, but possessed none of the brutal efficiency required to run it. He was currently bleeding capital, and Eleanor was his last-ditch anonymous lifeline. "Lena, table 7 needs water, now!" Eleanor flinched. That was Marco, the senior waiter. He was a tall, gaunt man with shadows under his eyes that spoke of 80-hour work weeks and a deep, abiding loyalty to a sinking ship. He was the only reason the front of house hadn't completely collapsed. "On it," Elena muttered, grabbing a heavy silver pitcher. She'd spent the last 4 hours polishing silverware, learning the Byzantine POS system, and trying to master the art of carrying 3 heavily laden plates on one arm. She was, to put it mildly, terrible at it. Her entire life had been dedicated to high-level strategy and algorithms. Balancing a tray of $40 cocktails was a completely different, and frankly, more terrifying, skill set. She approached table 7, a quiet couple celebrating an anniversary. She smiled, her customer service smile feeling brittle on her face. "More water?" "Yes, please," the woman said kindly. Elena poured. Her hand, usually steady when signing billion-dollar contracts, trembled slightly. A single, icy drop splashed onto the white tablecloth, millimeters from the man's iPhone. "Oh, careful," he murmured, pulling his phone away. "I'm so sorry. It's my first day," Elena said, her cheeks burning. She, Elena Vance, who had faced down hostile takeovers and congressional committees, was blushing over a drop of water. "It's fine, dear," the woman said. As Elena retreated, Marco intercepted her by the service station. "Breathe, Lena," he said, not unkindly. "You're thinking too hard. Don't look at the glass. Look at the table. Anticipate. You're not just carrying water. You're serving an experience." He quickly refolded 2 napkins. "You're smart. You'll get it. But you need to move faster. Charles is losing his mind tonight." Elena looked toward the restaurant's entrance. Charles Hemmings was pacing, a stout man in an ill-fitting Brioni suit. He kept checking his Patek Philippe, a watch Elena knew cost more than the restaurant's monthly payroll. He was sweating, dabbing his upper lip with a handkerchief. "Why is he so tense?" Elena asked, stacking glasses. "Is it just a busy night?" Marco scoffed, a dry, cynical sound. "Busy? This is half full for a Thursday." "No, he's waiting for someone. Some big-shot investor. He's been deep cleaning the private dining room for a week. He thinks this Ms. Vance is going to sail in here, write a check, and solve all his problems. Elena fought to keep her face neutral. Ms. Vance, huh? Sounds important. To him, she's the second coming, Marco said, grabbing a tray. To me, she's just another rich person who'll probably turn this place into another soulless steakhouse. But whatever. It pays the bills. Now, watch table 4. They look like they're ready for the check. Elena nodded, her stomach twisting. She liked Marco. He was competent, proud, and completely, understandably hopeless. He was exactly the kind of asset she looked for. But Charles was a liability. He was fawning over an idea of a savior, while the real one was right in front of him, wiping down menus. Her secret mission was about more than just numbers. She was here to see if the Seraphine deserved to be saved. Was there a core of excellence worth polishing? Or was she just polishing a turd? As she headed to table 4, the great oak doors of the restaurant swung open, letting in a blast of cold November air, and a woman who seemed to be carved from expensive, judgmental ice. Her name was Veronica Vanderbilt. She didn't just enter a room, she colonized it. She was flanked by 2 equally lacquered individuals, a rail-thin woman named Chloe, who wore her boredom like a badge of honor, and a man, Sebastian, with a smug, trust fund face and a very loud, very absurd Gucci blazer. A hush didn't just fall. The ambient sound of the restaurant, the clinking, the chatter, the soft jazz, was sucked into the vacuum of her arrival. Veronica peeled off her cream-colored Max Mara coat to reveal a skeletal frame draped in a crimson silk dress that Elena recognized from the latest Prada runway. Not available to the public yet. Her blonde hair was pulled into a chignon so tight it seemed to be pulling her face into a permanent state of disdain. "Charles!" Her voice cut through the room, sharp and clear as breaking glass. "Don't tell me you've given our table away. Sebastian will have an aneurysm if he's not by the window." Charles Hemmings, who had been anxiously waiting for Ms. Vance, nearly tripped over himself in his haste to greet her. His panic over the investor was instantly eclipsed by his terror of the socialite. "Ms. Vanderbilt, Veronica, of course not," he gushed, bowing slightly. "Table 12, as requested. Your regular?" "It had better be," Veronica said, not even looking at him. She was scanning the room, her eyes cataloguing every diner, every outfit, judging and dismissing. "The lighting in here is worse than I remember. Are you trying to make people look ill, Charles?" We're adjusting it, Ms. Vanderbilt. A new system is on order." "On order?" "Yes, like everything else," she drawled. She glided to the table, the best in the house, a plush crescent booth overlooking the street. Elena watched as she ran a perfectly manicured finger over the tabletop. Dust. "Charles, honestly. My apologies. I'll—" "Just get us champagne," Sebastian interjected, slumping into the booth. "The good stuff. Don't you dare bring us that Veuve Clicquot swill you served us last time. We want the Salon, 2007. Charles blanched. Elena knew from her pre-shift wine briefing that they had exactly 1 bottle of Salon 2007, and it cost $500. Of course, Sebastian. Right away, Charles stammered. "And send a competent waiter over," Chloe added, tapping her phone. "The last one you had looked like he learned his trade on a cruise ship." Charles nodded, his face a mask of pained obsequiousness. He scurried away, spotting Marco. "Marco, table 12. Handle them, please, it's Veronica." Marco's face tightened, but he nodded. "And the new girl? Lena?" "Keep her away from them," Charles hissed. She's clumsy. I can't risk it. Not tonight. Not with Miss Vance due any minute." He scurried off toward the private dining room to check it for the 15th time. Elena felt a prickle of annoyance. Clumsy. She was running a multi-billion-dollar fund, but here she was just clumsy. "Lena," Marco said, his voice low, "go take table 9's dessert order. I'll deal with royalty." For the next 20 minutes, Elena tried to focus. She took the dessert order. She delivered coffees. She tried to ignore the gravitational pull of table 12. But it was impossible. Veronica's laughter was a piercing shriek that seemed to mock the entire room. She and her friends were the loudest, most obnoxious people there, yet everyone, including the staff, treated them with a bizarre, fearful deference. Elena was refilling water at an adjacent table when she heard her. "I mean, just look at this place," Veronica said, gesturing with her champagne flute. "It's so sad. It's like a museum of 2010. Charles is running it into the ground. Daddy says he'll be bankrupt by Christmas." "Then why are we here?" Sebastian asked, swirling his wine. "Because, darling, it's the perfect place to be seen before it officially dies. It's like visiting a very sick, very rich old aunt." "You have to pay your respects," Veronica smirked. "And," Chloe added, "it's the only place in town that'll still extend us this much credit." They all laughed. Eleanor felt a cold anger settle in her stomach. They weren't just diners. They were vultures. She was clearing plates from another table when Marco, looking pale, approached her. "I need you to take this bread basket to table 12, he said, his voice tight. "What?" "But Charles said—" "I don't care what Charles said. I've got a situation in the kitchen. Chef just threatened to walk out. And Charles is locked in his office, hyperventilating. You're the only one free. Just drop the bread. Don't talk. Don't make eye contact. Just drop it and walk away. Got it?" Elena nodded, her heart suddenly pounding. "Got it." She picked up the silver basket filled with artisanal sourdough and thyme-infused focaccia. She took a deep breath. She was Eve Vance. She could handle this. She approached the table. "Excuse me, your bread." Sebastian grabbed a piece without looking. Chloe ignored her. Veronica, however, slowly lifted her eyes, her gaze traveling from the basket, up Elena's arm, over the cheap uniform, and finally landing on her face. Veronica's lip curled. "Well, well, what have we here?" she said, her voice dripping with amusement. "Charles has really scraped the bottom of the barrel, hasn't he?" Elena froze, her hand still on the basket. I'm just— "Don't speak," Veronica snapped. "It's a visual observation. Look at her, Chloe. Those shoes, are those— Keds?" "They look comfortable," Chloe offered, unhelpfully. "Comfortable," Veronica repeated, as if the word was a piece of rotten fruit. "Darling, comfortable is what you wear when you've given up on life. This is the Seraphine, not a bowling alley. And your hair, my God, it's just so— brown." Elena stood, rooted to the spot, a red-hot wave of humiliation washing over her. It was one thing to be anonymous. It was another to be vivisected. "That's not appropriate," Elena said, her voice barely a whisper. This, it seemed, was the funniest thing Veronica had ever heard. She threw her head back and laughed, a brittle, ugly sound. "Not appropriate? Oh, honey, no. You're not appropriate. You don't belong here." "Some people," she said, leaning in conspiratorially, "are born to dine at places like this. And some people are born to serve us. You should really learn to embrace your station in life, Lena." Elena's hand tightened on the basket. She could feel the eyes of the adjacent tables. She was a spectacle. "Just enjoy your bread," Elena managed, forcing herself to place the basket on the table. As she did, Sebastian, gesticulating wildly while telling a story, knocked his arm into hers. It wasn't hard, but it was enough. Elena lost her balance. The heavy silver basket clattered onto the table, and a small, delicate ramekin of truffle-infused butter beside it went airborne. It landed with a soft, sickening splat right on the front of Veronica Vanderbilt's crimson Prada dress, leaving a greasy, obscene-looking yellow stain. The restaurant, which had been loud, went utterly, completely, deathly silent. For a full 5 seconds, no one moved. Veronica looked down at the stain on her dress. She stared at it, as if it were a mortal wound. Her face, which had been animated with cruel mirth, went perfectly blank. The silence stretched, becoming thin and toxic. Then she slowly, deliberately, lifted her gaze to Elena. "You," she whispered, her voice lethally soft. I am so sorry," Elena stammered, grabbing a napkin. He bumped my arm." "Don't touch me!" Veronica shrieked, recoiling as if Eleanor were diseased. The whisper was gone, replaced by a razor-edged fury. "Don't you dare touch me, you filthy, clumsy idiot!" The entire room was now staring, forks frozen halfway to mouths. "Sebastian, you bumped her!" Chloe said, her eyes wide. "I did no such thing!" Sebastian sputtered, already backing away. She threw it at her." "She threw it?" Veronica's voice rose to a hysterical pitch. "She assaulted me." "No, I didn't. It was an accident," Elena insisted, her professionalism shattering, leaving only a raw, defensive anger. She was used to being in control. This public, degrading chaos was new. "An accident? An accident?" Veronica stood up so fast her chair screeched against the marble floor. "This dress is couture. It's off the Milan runway. This is a $20,000 dress, you stupid cow! You couldn't afford the thread on this dress if you worked here for 1,000 years." Marco was suddenly there, pushing Elena behind him. "Miss Vanderbilt, please. It was a clear accident. Let us take care of the dry cleaning." "Dry cleaning?" Veronica laughed, a sound like smashing ornaments. "This is butter, on raw silk. It's ruined. She ruined it. I want her fired." Charles Hemmings came running from his office, his face the color of old oatmeal. He had heard the scream. He saw the stain. He saw Veronica. And he saw his last hope for survival circling the drain. "Veronica! Miss Vanderbilt, what happened?" he panted, pulling at his collar. "What happened, Charles, is that you hired this Neanderthal?" Veronica spat, jabbing a finger at Elena. "She deliberately ruined my dress. I want her fired. I want her fired, and I want you to pay for this." Of course. Anything." Charles was wringing his hands, not even looking at Elena. He was looking at the woman who could, with a single Instagram post, destroy what little reputation his restaurant had left. "I didn't do it deliberately," Elena said, her voice cold and shaking. The adrenaline was wearing off, replaced by a glacial rage. "Your friend bumped my arm." "Are you calling me a liar?" Sebastian bristled. "I would never." "She's calling you a liar," Veronica cried. "She assaults me, and now she's insulting my guests. Charles, are you just going to stand there? Or are you going to handle this?" Handle this. The words hung in the air. Charles turned to Eleanor. His eyes were desperate, pleading. They weren't the eyes of a boss. They were the eyes of a trapped animal. "Lena," he began, his voice trembling. "Go to the back. Just go." "No," Veronica snapped. "Not to the back. Out. I want to see her walk out of that door. I want to know she's gone." Elena stared at Charles. "Say something," she willed him. "Be a manager. Be a man. Defend your staff from an obvious, hysterical bully." Charles wouldn't meet her eyes. He was looking at the floor, at Veronica's shoes, at the stain. Anywhere but at her. "Miss Vanderbilt," he tried. "Don't Miss Vanderbilt me, Charles. You are this close. She held 2 fingers a millimeter apart. To being blacklisted. You, this restaurant, your entire tacky little life. You want to save it? Fire. Her. Now. The pressure in the room was unbearable. Elena could feel the sympathy from the other diners, but it was a useless, passive pity. She could feel Marco's rage radiating off him beside her. But he was powerless. He needed this job. They all did. And Charles. He was a weak man, cornered by a predator. "Lena," he said again, his voice cracking. He finally looked at her, his face a miserable portrait of defeat. I'm so sorry. You have to go. Please, just clock out. I'll mail you your check." He had done it. He had fired her. Elena looked at him. She looked at the man who was begging her, in secret, to give him millions of dollars. The man who was currently throwing her to the wolves for the price of a stained dress and a socialite's tantrum. "You're firing me," Elena said. It wasn't a question. It was a statement, a confirmation of data. "I have no choice," he whispered, a desperate, frantic plea. "You always have a choice, Charles," Elena said, her voice suddenly, terrifyingly calm. Veronica smirked, crossing her arms. "That's right, Piggy. He chose. He chose to save his restaurant from trash like you. Now go. Shoo. Your shift is over." She even made a little shooing motion with her hand. It was that gesture, that dismissive, dehumanizing flick of the wrist. That was the moment the Lena persona evaporated. Elena Vance, the CEO, the investor, the titan, took its place. "Charles," Elena said. Her voice was no longer the flustered, slightly reedy tone of Lena. It was the voice she used in her boardroom. A low, resonant alto that sliced through the air and commanded instant, absolute attention. Charles, who was turning to apologize again to Veronica, froze. He turned back, his eyes wide. Veronica's smirk faltered. "Charles, pick up your phone," Elena said. "What?" he stammered. "Your phone, the one in your pocket. Pick it up." Confused, terrified, Charles fumbled for his phone. He pulled it out, staring at it blankly. "Why?" "Because," Elena said, reaching into her own cheap polyester pocket and pulling out a sleek, minimalist black smartphone. "I'm about to call you." She tapped her screen. A second later, Charles's phone buzzed on his trembling palm. He looked down at the screen. The caller ID read, E. Vance. Charles Hemmings's world tilted. He stared at the screen. E. Vance. The name glowed, pulsing with the incoming call. It was the name that had been his singular prayer for 3 months. The name he associated with salvation, with solvency, with not having to tell his wife they were losing their house. He looked at the phone. Then, his gaze, slow and filled with a dawning, cinematic horror, lifted from the screen to the face of the waitress. To Lena. The woman in front of him was not the clumsy, nervous girl from the trial shift. The woman in front of him was standing with perfect, ramrod-straight posture. Her chin was up. Her eyes, which he had mistaken for dull, were now a shade of brilliant, icy blue he hadn't noticed before. They were fixed on him. They were not angry. They were not sad. They were, infinitely more terrifyingly, assessing. "Hello, Charles," Elena said, her own phone still held lightly in her hand. "You should probably answer that. It's important." The phone continued to buzz. Bzzzt. 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 The sound was deafening in the silent restaurant. Charles couldn't form a word. His brain was failing to connect 2 completely irreconcilable facts. The trash, waitress in the $20 uniform, and the E. Vance, who controlled a $10 billion private equity fund. Veronica, who had been enjoying her victory, now looked utterly bewildered. "What is this?" she demanded, her voice losing its sharp edge, replaced by a note of confusion. "What kind of stupid prank is this? Charles, who is she?" Charles didn't answer. He was still staring at Eleanor, his mouth open. She's... Eleanor sighed, tapped her screen to end the call, and slipped her phone back into her apron. "He's in shock," Elena said, addressing the room as if it were a quarterly meeting. "Let me clarify. Charles, you can stop pacing. Ms. Vance is here. She's been here for 5 hours." She reached behind her back and, with a single, sharp pull, untied her apron. She folded it once, neatly, and placed it on the nearest empty table. "My name," she said, her voice clear and carrying to every corner of the room, "is Elena Vance. I am the founder and CEO of E. Vance Enterprises, and I am, or was, the investor you've been waiting for." If the silence before had been tense, this was a void. Marco's jaw dropped. The kitchen staff, who had crept out to see the commotion, froze. Veronica Vanderbilt's perfectly painted face went from confused to crimson to a pale, sickly white. The blood drained from her face so fast she looked like a porcelain doll. That's not possible," Veronica stammered. You're a waitress." "I was," Elena corrected her. "I was a waitress while I put myself through my undergrad at Berkeley. I was a line cook to pay for my master's at MIT, and I was Lena, your waitress, tonight, to conduct my final round of due diligence on this restaurant, to see if it was a sound investment." She turned her cool gaze back to Charles, who looked like he might faint. "You see, Charles, I never invest in a business. I invest in people. I wanted to see how you managed your team, how your staff performed under pressure, what the soul of the Seraphine really was." She gestured to Marco. "Your senior waiter, Marco, is a gem. He's a natural leader, empathetic, efficient, and fiercely loyal, even when you're clearly running him into the ground. Your kitchen staff," she nodded to the chefs, "is turning out 4-star food with 3-star equipment. Your people, Charles, are magnificent. They are the asset." Then her gaze hardened, and she turned back to him. "But you, Charles, you are a catastrophic liability." "Now, wait," Charles began, finding his voice, a weak, reedy thing. "No, you wait," Elena snapped, holding up a hand. The authority in the gesture was so absolute, he stopped instantly. "I watched you tonight. You weren't managing. You were hiding. You were panicking. You were waiting for a magical check to solve problems that are, fundamentally, about your own lack of leadership. And then," her voice dropped, "this child," she gestured to Veronica, "threw a tantrum, and you were presented with a choice." She took a step closer to him. "You could have defended your employee from a belligerent, abusive customer. You could have shown an ounce of loyalty. You could have managed the situation. But you didn't. You chose to humiliate and fire a woman you thought was poor and powerless just to appease a bully who you thought had influence. She was going to ruin me," Charles pleaded. "She is ruining you," Elena countered. "She and her friends openly bragged about running up a tab they have no intention of paying. They mocked your restaurant. They mocked you, and in return you groveled. You sold your integrity for the chance that she might not write a bad review on Yelp." Elena turned her full attention to Veronica. The socialite, for the first time in her life, looked small. "And you?" Elena said. Veronica flinched, as if Elena had physically struck her. She was now the one on display, and she was discovering, much to her horror, that she didn't like it at all. "Me," she whispered. "You," Elena affirmed, her voice a steel blade. "You sat here in your $20,000 dress, and you mocked my hair, my shoes, my station in life. You told me I was born to serve. Elena took a step toward table 12. Sebastian and Chloe looked like they wanted to dissolve into the upholstery. Let's talk about what we're born into, shall we? You were born Veronica Vanderbilt, a name that, 2 generations ago, meant something. It meant industry, power, and vision. Now? Elena scoffed, a sound of pure contempt. It just means you, a spoiled, cruel, utterly useless parasite, dining out on a legacy you did nothing to build. You can't talk to me like that, Veronica managed, but her voice had no conviction. It was a high-pitched, terrified squeak. Do you know who my father is? It was the question Elena had been waiting for. Yes, I do, Elena said, a predatory calm settling over her. I know all about your father. I know about Harrison Vanderbilt and his teetering commercial real estate empire. I know about the 3 massive, over-leveraged loans he took out from Sterling Atlantic Bank to fund his disastrous Hudson Yards project. Veronica's face went from pale to translucent. How do you know that? I know that, Elena said, because as of 4 p.m. yesterday, E. Vance Enterprises completed its acquisition of Sterling Atlantic Bank. Which means, Veronica, I am your father's bank. I hold his debt. I own the loans that are keeping him from total, abject ruin. A small, strangled sound escaped Veronica's throat. Chloe visibly gasped and put a hand over her mouth. So when you ask me if I know who your father is, Elena continued, leaning in just slightly, the answer is yes. He's my newest and most desperate dark client, and I can assure you his station in life is far more precarious than mine. Eleanor stood back up to her full height. You came in here tonight and demanded the $500 salon champagne. You insulted the staff. You deliberately, and with malice, tried to get a working woman fired during a cost-of-living crisis, all because of an accident your friend caused. You did it because it made you feel powerful. Now this, Elena said, gesturing around the silent restaurant, is real power. It's not being cruel to people you think are beneath you. It's having the ability to destroy a person's entire world. And choosing not to. She paused, letting the words hang. At least, she added, most of the time. She turned back to Charles, who was now leaning against a marble column, his face ashen. The deal, Elena said, is off. No, Charles cried, stumbling forward. Please, Elena, Miss Vance, please, it was a mistake. A terrible mistake. I'll do anything. I'll fire them, he said, pointing a shaking finger at Veronica. You don't get it, do you, Charles? Elena said, her voice filled with a sudden weariness. This isn't about them anymore. It's about you. You failed the test. You showed me your character. You're a weak leader, and you've built a house of cards on the backs of good people. My fund doesn't invest in weak leaders. Please, he begged. Tears were openly streaming down his face, mixing with his sweat. My house, my kids' school. I'll be ruined. Everything is on the line. Eleanor looked at him, her expressions unreadable. The entire restaurant was holding its breath. Marco was watching her, his face a mixture of awe and terror. He knew his job, and the jobs of all his friends, were on that line too. Elena was silent for a long, agonizing minute. She looked at Charles, the sniveling, defeated owner. She looked at Marco, the proud, exhausted waiter. She looked at the kitchen staff, their white coats stained with sweat, huddled by the door. She was making calculations. A cold, hard algorithm was running in her head. Variable 1, Charles is a liability. Variable 2, the staff is the asset. Variable 3, the brand is salvageable. Variable 4, The bully needs to be punished. Conclusion, the structure must change. All right, Elena said, finally. Charles looked up, a desperate, pathetic flicker of hope in his eyes. The original deal is off, Elena clarified. The one where I give you $5 million and you remain in charge. That deal is dead. If the Seraphine is to survive, we're doing it on my terms, and my terms are not negotiable. Charles was nodding before she even finished speaking. Yes, anything. Whatever you want, Miss Vance. Anything. Good, Elena said. She walked to the center of the room, her presence now completely dominating the space. She was no longer Lena, the waitress. She was E. Vance, and this was her boardroom. Term number 1, she announced, holding up a finger. Charles, you are no longer the president of operations. As of this second, you are relegated to a minority partner. You will handle the books, and only the books. You will have no contact with staff, no authority over scheduling, and you will never, ever make a management decision again. Is that clear? Yes, he whispered, wiping his face. Yes, crystal clear. Term number 2. She turned to Marco, who looked as if he'd been struck by lightning. Marco, you're promoted. You are the new general manager of the Seraphine. You will report directly to me. Your salary is doubled, effective immediately. You will have full authority to hire, fire, and manage the floor. Marco's mouth opened and closed. Me? Ms. Vance? I don't know what to say. Don't say anything, Elena said, offering him the first small, genuine smile of the night. Just do the job I've been watching you do for free for the last 5 hours. You've earned it. Term number 3. She looked at the kitchen staff and then at the rest of the waiters who were peeking from the service station. My fund's initial capital injection will not go to new marble or stupid lighting. It will go to you. All kitchen and front-of-house staff are receiving a 30% across-the-board wage increase. And we are closing on Mondays and Tuesdays. No more 80-hour weeks. This restaurant will no longer be built on the burnout of its employees. A wave of audible gasps and whispered, "Oh my gods," rippled through the staff. Marco actually put a hand on the wall to steady himself. And finally, Elena said, her voice dropping as she turned back to the toxic stain that was table 12. Term number 4. Veronica, Sebastian, and Chloe had been frozen, trapped in their booth, witnesses to their own execution. The bill? Elena said. The bill? Sebastian stammered. Yes, the bill. For the $500 bottle of Salon, for the 3 appetizers, the 4 entrees you've ordered, and the cocktails. Your credit padding, as Chloe so delicately put it, is over. Marco, please print their check, full price, and add a standard 18% gratuity. Though, she added, God knows they don't deserve it. You can't, Veronica shrieked, her old self flickering back to life. This meal is comped. Charles always comps us. Charles, Elena said, not looking at him, is comping nothing. I don't have that kind of money on me, Sebastian muttered, his face beet red. I don't care, Elena said. Sell your ridiculous jacket. And as for you, Veronica, she walked right up to the booth, close enough that Veronica was forced to press herself against the back cushion. You are banned, for life, from this establishment and any other property I ever acquire. If I see you or your vapid friends in here again, I will have you removed for trespassing. My father, Veronica tried again, her last pathetic defense. Your father, Elena interrupted, is going to have a very, very bad day tomorrow when I call in his markers. But I'll tell you what, I'm feeling generous. I'll give him an extension, a difficulty forbearance. And in exchange, you are going to do 2 things. What? Veronica whispered, her eyes wide with fear. "First, you are going to get up, walk to the kitchen, and you are going to apologize to the chefs whose food you insulted. Second, you are going to apologize to Marco for your behavior. And third, you are going to apologize to me for the dress." "What? My dress? You ruined my dress." "No," Elena said, picking up the cheap stained apron from the table. "You ruined mine. This was my work uniform. And you and your friend deliberately smeared butter on it. So you're going to apologize. And then you're going to pay your bill. And then you're going to leave." Veronica stared at her, her entire world, built on a foundation of entitlement and daddy's money, collapsing in on itself. She was trapped. If she refused, Elena would bankrupt her family. The choice was simple: humiliation or annihilation. Slowly, visibly trembling with a rage and shame she had never before experienced, Veronica Vanderbilt slid out of the booth. The walk to the kitchen was the longest 10 yards of Veronica Vanderbilt's life. Every step on the cold, unforgiving marble was an agony. The sound of her own Louboutin heels, usually a sharp, confident click-clack that announced her arrival, now sounded like a death knell. She could feel the eyes. Oh God, the eyes. They weren't the admiring, envious, or fawning gazes she was accustomed to. They were pitying. They were mocking. They were, worst of all, fascinated. From the corner of her eye, she saw a man at a corner table, his smartphone held up, its little red light glowing. He was recording her. Her entire life, a carefully curated performance of effortless superiority, was immolating. Marco, his face a mask of professional neutrality, led the way. He didn't gloat. He didn't say a word. He simply held the swinging kitchen door open for her, a gesture that was at once polite and a profound, devastating power move. Veronica, Sebastian, and Chloe stepped inside. The kitchen, which had been a symphony of controlled chaos, went silent. Sauté pans were held mid-air. The hiss of the grill seemed to quiet. Every single cook, pot washer, and line prepper turned to look at them. The head chef, a formidable, barrel-chested man named Antoine Dubois, stepped forward. He wiped his hands on his apron, which was stained with honor, not butter. His white toque was slightly askew, and his eyes, which had seen thousands of entitled customers, held no fear. "Yes?" Chef Antoine asked, his voice a low rumble. She," Veronica began, her voice failing her. She looked to Chloe and Sebastian for support. They both stared intently at their own very expensive shoes. "She is here to apologize, Chef," Marco supplied, his voice echoing slightly in the tiled room. Chef Antoine crossed his arms. "Is she? I have erred nothing." Veronica's hands clenched into fists. This was the final, deepest humiliation. Apologizing to the help. But the image of her father's face, of his empire crumbling because she couldn't swallow her pride, flashed in her mind. It was Eleanor Vance's checkmate. She forced the words out, tasting like ash. "I am sorry for insulting your food." The chef tilted his head. "You did not insult my food, mademoiselle. You insulted my team. You called this place sad. He gestured to the young line cooks, the old vegetable preppers, the sweating dishwasher. "They are this place. You apologize to them." Veronica's eyes scanned the hostile faces. This was impossible. This was a nightmare. "I apologize," she said, her voice a low, strangled hiss directed at the floor. "To all of you. Louder," a young prep cook said from the back. "I said," Veronica shrieked, her control snapping, "I apologize." "That is better," Chef Antoine said, unimpressed. "Now get out of my kitchen. You are disturbing the service." He turned his back on her, a gesture of dismissal, so profound it was almost a physical blow. "Marco, the lady is finished here." Marco nodded once and led the trio back into the dining room. Veronica was visibly trembling now, her face a blotchy, tear-streaked ruin. Her mask was gone. They were marched back to Marco, who stood near the service station. This was the next circle of hell. "Miss Vanderbilt," Marco said, his voice level, "you had something to say to me." She looked at him. Just an hour ago, he was a servant, a non-entity. Now, he held the power of her family's future in his hands, an extension of the woman who was watching them all from the center of the room. "I apologize," she whispered, her eyes burning with a hateful, impotent rage. "I'm sorry, I didn't quite catch that," Marco said, leaning in just slightly. It was the only indulgence he allowed himself. "I apologize," she bit out, the words sharp, for my behavior." "Thank you, Miss Vanderbilt," Marco said, his face unreadable. "It is noted." Finally, the gauntlet was almost over. They were brought to Eleanor, who stood by their table, her arms crossed. She looked like a general surveying a conquered field. "And?" Elena prompted, her voice soft. Veronica looked at her. She looked at the cheap polyester uniform. She looked at the face that, to her, had been utterly forgettable, and was now the most terrifying face she had ever seen. I'll pay for the dress," Veronica suddenly blurted out, a last, desperate attempt to turn this back into a transaction. "The Prada, it's ruined. I'll buy you a new one. 10 of them, let's end this." Elena actually smiled. It was a cold, thin, devastating sight. "You still don't get it, do you?" Elena said, shaking her head. "You think this is about a dress. You think this is about money. You think you can just buy your way out of a consequence. I have more money than your entire family will see in 3 generations, Veronica. I don't need you to buy me anything." She picked up the stained, discarded apron from the chair. "You weren't asked to pay. You were asked to apologize. For this. For trying to have a woman fired because you felt powerful." Veronica's face crumpled. The last of her fight went out, leaving a hollow, terrified shell. "I am sorry," she whispered, the tears now flowing freely, carving paths through her expensive foundation. For your apron." "Good," Elena said, dropping the apron back onto the table. "It's not accepted, but as Marco said, it's noted. Now, your bill." She nodded. "Marco, if you would." With a newfound, crisp authority, Marco produced the leather-bound check presenter. He didn't just place it on the table. He presented it with a small, professional flourish to Sebastian. "Your check, sir." Sebastian, who had been trying to blend into the wallpaper, flinched. He opened it. His face went from red to a pasty, sickly grey. This is $2,312. "That is correct," Marco said. "The salon, the cocktails, your food, and an 18% service fee." We didn't even eat the entrees," Chloe protested, her voice a high-pitched whine. "You ordered them," Elena said, her voice flat. "The kitchen prepared them. You will pay for them. That's how restaurants work. You should try it sometime." Sebastian fumbled for his wallet. He pulled out a black Amex card and thrust it at Marco. "Just run it." Marco took it, went to the POS system, and returned a moment later. He placed the slip and a pen in front of Sebastian. "I'm afraid," Marco said, his voice betraying not a hint of emotion, "that it has been declined, sir." Sebastian froze. "What? That's not possible. Run it again." "I have, sir," Marco said. "Twice. It has been declined. Would you or Miss Chloe?" He turned to the other woman. Like to provide an alternative form of payment? Sebastian was now sweating profusely, his Gucci blazer looking like a cheap costume. Chloe, darling, I must have left I'll pay you back. Chloe stared at him, her eyes wide with a look of pure, unadulterated contempt. She snatched the bill from his hand, her own trembling. She pulled out her own card and threw it on the table. Just take it. Marco processed her card. It went through. She signed the slip with a jerky, angry slash of the pen, not even looking at the total. Thank you for dining at the Seraphine, Marco said, his voice perfectly level. Please, have a good night. The trio stood. They were broken. In the space of 30 minutes, they had gone from masters of the universe to pariahs. They gathered their coats, Veronica's beautiful Max Mara now looking like a shroud. They didn't speak. They just walked, heads down, through the silent, staring dining room. The great oak doors swung open, letting in the cold night air. And then they were gone. The doors clicked shut. For a full 10 seconds, the restaurant was absolutely still. The diners, the staff, everyone. Then, from table 7, the older woman, the one Elena had spilled water on hours before, began to clap. Just a slow, steady, deliberate applause. Her husband joined in. Then, the man who had been filming put his phone away and clapped. Within seconds, the entire dining room was on its feet, a wave of applause and cheers washing over the room. The staff, huddled by the service stations, looked stunned. A young waitress, one who had been visibly trembling during Veronica's tirade, burst into tears of pure relief. Marco closed his eyes for a moment, letting the sound wash over him. Charles Hemmings was the only one not clapping. He was still slumped against the column, a ghost at his own funeral. Elena raised a hand, and the applause quieted. She walked over to Charles. "Charles," she said, her voice softer now, almost gentle. "Go home. Go see your family." "Elena, Miss Vance, please." He tried one last time, his voice a pathetic rasp. "I'm a good man. I was just scared. She had so much power." "She had no power, Charles," Elena corrected him. "She had a loud voice and a famous last name. You gave her the power. You gave her power over your business, over your staff, and over your own integrity. That's why you can't run this company." He looked down, the finality of it crushing him. "Go home," she repeated. "My legal team will have the new partnership contracts with your lawyer by 9 a.m. They are surprisingly generous, all things considered. They will secure your family's future. But they are not negotiable. Sign them." He nodded, a single jerky movement. He looked around the room, his restaurant, as if seeing it for the last time. Then, without a word, he shuffled to the exit and disappeared into the night. Elena turned to the assembled staff. They all snapped to attention, looking at her with a mixture of awe, terror, and a new, fragile hope. "All right," she said, her voice ringing with command. "Listen to me, everyone. The show is over. But the work is not. The old way of doing things at the Seraphine? It's over. Finished." She looked at the faces, from the oldest busboy to the youngest hostess. "My fund's capital injection is real. The raises are real. The new, humane work hours are real. But in return, I expect excellence. Not just good. Excellence. But we will no longer pursue excellence at the cost of our dignity." She locked eyes with the staff. "Let me be perfectly clear. The customer is not always right. The customer is our guest. And if any guest, no matter who they are, no matter how much money they have, treats any one of you with the kind of disrespect we saw here tonight, you are to come and find Marco. And Marco," she turned to him, "you are to personally show them the door. We are a team. We protect our team. Is that understood?" A ragged, emotional, "Yes, Miss Vance," came from the group. "Good," she said, a small smile playing on her lips. "Now, to our remaining guests," she gestured to the diners. "Marco, please send a complimentary glass of the real champagne to every table, with my apologies for the interruption. And for the rest of the staff, let's get back to work. Let's show them what the Seraphine is really about." The staff, energized and reborn, scattered, a new purpose in their step. The restaurant, which had felt like a tomb, was suddenly alive again. Elena walked over to Marco, who was already directing the champagne service, his posture straighter, his voice clearer. "You look good in the role, Marco," she said quietly. He turned to her, his eyes shining with unshed tears. "Miss Vance?" "Elena." "Why? Why me?" I'm a waiter. I don't have an MBA. I don't know the first thing about being a general manager." "I don't hire resumes, Marco. I hire character," Elena said. "I can teach you how to read a P&L sheet. I can't teach you how to have a spine. I can't teach you loyalty. I can't teach you to care about your team more than you care about your own comfort. You have all the things I can't teach. I'll handle the rest." He just nodded, too overwhelmed to speak. Eleanor looked over at the now empty table 12. It was a disaster. Smeared butter, half-eaten food, spilled champagne, crumpled napkins, a monument to the ugliness that had just been evicted. "Someone," she sighed, "needs to clean up that mess." "I'll get a busboy right on," Marco began. "No," Elena said. She walked over, unhooked a bus tray from the service station, and strode to the table. "Miss Vance!" Marco protested, horrified. "Elena, you can't. You're the owner." Elena paused, her hands hovering over a dirty champagne flute. "I am the owner," she agreed, picking it up and placing it on the tray. "And the owner just saw a table of pigs leave a pigsty. This is the last remnant of the old restaurant, the one that was built on bowing and scraping to people who despised us." She began to stack the plates, the greasy, congealed butter smearing on her fingers. She didn't flinch. "I'm not asking my new, highly paid and respected staff to clean up the literal filth of the people who just humiliated them. I'll get it." She looked at him, her eyes clear and direct. "It's called leading from the front, Marco. It's the first lesson. The new Seraphine doesn't ask anyone to do a job the boss isn't willing to do herself." She scraped the plates, piled the glasses, and gathered the stained linen. The staff stopped what they were doing to watch. They saw their new billionaire owner, in her cheap, ruined uniform, bussing a table. And in that moment, they knew. This wasn't just a new boss. It was a new beginning. Elena Vance, lifting the heavy tray, felt the familiar weight, a weight she hadn't felt since her days at MIT. It felt good. It felt right. The restaurant was no longer a beautiful corpse. It had a pulse, and for the first time, it had a soul. And just like that, one act of cruel, snobby arrogance cost a socialite her reputation, her father's finances, and her favorite table. And that same act gave a hard-working, overlooked waiter a promotion, a future, and a boss who finally saw his worth. Eleanor Vance didn't just save that restaurant. She gave it a soul. It's a powerful reminder that you never, ever know who you're talking to. The person you dismiss today might just be the person who signs your paycheck or your foreclosure papers tomorrow. What did you think of Veronica's takedown? Was it too harsh, or did she get exactly what she deserved? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you loved this story of karma and consequences, please hit that like button, share it with a friend who loves a good revenge story, and most importantly, subscribe to the channel so you never miss a single update. We have new stories coming every week.